They say the older you get, the harder it is to surprise you. But what if I told you a 58-year-old man outsmarted both his cheating wife and his best friend, without ever raising his voice, without breaking a single law, and without a single person in town realizing what he'd done until it was far too late? It started as a simple post on Reddit. A man calling himself Throwaway Dad 1959 wrote, "After 32 years of marriage, I discovered my wife was having an affair. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply decided to teach her and her lover a lesson they'd never forget." When I first read that line, I thought it was just another angry story. But as I kept reading, I realized this wasn't revenge born from rage. It was revenge born from calm, methodical patience, the kind only a lifetime of wisdom can create. The man's name, let's call him Edward. He was 58 when he discovered the truth, a retired firefighter from a small town in Oregon. He'd been married to Margaret, or Maggie, for over 3 decades. They had 2 grown children, both out of the house, and were known in their community as that perfect old couple. Every Sunday, they'd sit together on the porch with coffee. Every Christmas, they hosted dinner for the whole family. Everyone saw them as a living example of loyalty and love. But the truth was hiding right under Edward's nose. He wrote that he started noticing small changes first. Maggie becoming protective of her phone, spending long evenings volunteering at the local library, and dressing up a bit too nicely for errands. He brushed it off for months. He even blamed himself, thinking maybe he'd gotten boring, or maybe retirement had made him too available. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Then one evening, while cleaning out his truck, Edward found something odd, a hotel receipt tucked between the seats. It was in Maggie's handwriting, and the date matched one of her library nights. Still, he didn't confront her. He wanted proof, and he wanted time to think. So he started observing. He noticed Maggie was texting more often late at night. Sometimes she'd smile at her phone and quickly hide it when he walked in. One morning, when she was in the shower, he checked the phone. There it was. Messages from Richard, Edward's old fishing buddy, a man he'd known for 20 years. The texts were explicit. One even said, "Can't wait for our next library session." Edward's world shattered, not loudly, but silently. He wrote that he sat on the edge of the bed for nearly an hour, just staring at the phone, feeling nothing but an empty ache. Then he put it back quietly, like nothing had happened. He didn't want drama. He wanted justice. He started gathering information, quietly. He found out they'd been seeing each other for nearly a year. He found hidden bank transfers. Maggie had been secretly pulling money from their joint savings. And Richard? He was recently divorced and had hinted to others that he might retire somewhere warm soon. Edward realized they were planning to leave together, using his money. That was when he decided to make his move. For weeks, he pretended everything was fine. He cooked dinner, laughed at her jokes, even offered to help her with the library events. Maggie seemed happier than ever, maybe relieved that he hadn't noticed anything. But Edward was far from blind. He started preparing. He met with his attorney, a young guy who'd handled his pension paperwork. Together, they quietly restructured all of Edward's assets, his savings, pension, even the ownership of the house. Everything was transferred into a new trust under his daughter's name. He then opened a small separate account in his name, with just enough to make it look like it was all he had. Meanwhile, he started acting strange. He'd pretend to forget things, talk slower, ask Maggie to repeat herself. At first, she was worried, but then she grew distant. In one message to Richard, which Edward later printed, she wrote, "He's slowing down. I think it's time. Maybe after Christmas we can finally go." So Edward set the trap. 2 weeks before Christmas, he told Maggie he wanted to take her somewhere special, a cabin near the mountains they used to visit when they were younger. She hesitated at first, but agreed. When they got there, everything seemed normal. They cooked dinner, reminisced about old times, and drank wine. Edward waited until late at night, when she was half asleep, and said, "You know, I've been thinking about our future. I want you to be happy, Maggie, truly. She smiled faintly and said, You make me happy. But he saw the lie in her eyes. The next morning, she got a text in from Richard. Edward saw it flash on the screen. Ready to tell him yet? We can leave this week. He didn't say a word. He let her think he hadn't seen it. Instead, he smiled and said, I'll run into town to grab some supplies. But he didn't go into town. He went home, hours away. He left her up there alone. That same day, he called their bank and reported the joint account as compromised. Then he called his lawyer, who filed the divorce papers that same afternoon. By the time Maggie returned home 2 days later, Edward was gone. The house was empty except for her clothes, her car, and a note on the kitchen table. It said, I know everything. You took love and turned it into a lie. I took the money and turned it into a lesson. Attached to the note was a printout, the text messages, the hotel receipts, and the property transfer documents. Maggie panicked. She tried calling Edward, but his number had been changed. She called the bank. Her access was frozen. She called Richard, and that's when the second part of Edward's plan unfolded. Because you see, Edward had one more surprise. He'd sent an anonymous letter to Richard's employer, with proof of his affair with a married woman, as well as documents showing Richard had been using company funds for business trips that were actually romantic getaways. Within a week, Richard was fired. His reputation in town was destroyed. And Maggie? She was left with nothing but her guilt. Edward, meanwhile, moved to a small lakeside cabin 3 towns over. He stayed quiet for months. Didn't talk to friends. Didn't post online. He just rebuilt his peace. But then, one night he decided to share his story on Reddit. Not to brag, but to reflect. He wrote, Revenge isn't about getting even. It's about closing the door quietly and locking it forever. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped letting them destroy me. The post exploded. Thousands of comments flooded in, people calling him a genius, a legend, a gentleman of revenge. One user wrote, Sir, you didn't just win. You set the gold standard for graceful revenge. A few months later, Edward updated the thread. He said Maggie had tried reaching out through their daughter, apologizing, saying she'd made a terrible mistake and wanted forgiveness. He told his daughter to tell her mother the truth. I forgave her long ago, but I don't ever want to see her again. As for Richard, he moved out of town. Rumor had it he tried to start a new business but went bankrupt within a year. Edward, on the other hand, started volunteering at the local fire department again, teaching safety classes to kids. He found peace in helping others. He even began dating someone new, though he never mentioned it much online. But what made his story so powerful wasn't just what he did. It was how he did it. He never raised his voice. He never humiliated anyone publicly. He simply used patience, intelligence, and calm to dismantle 2 people who thought they were smarter than him. His final words in that Reddit post read like something from a movie. He wrote, When you're young, you think revenge is loud, shouting, breaking, destroying. But when you've lived long enough, you learn the quiet kind is the one that truly lasts. That post went viral, shared across YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. People from all over the world left comments like, This man's story restored my faith in karma. You can't buy wisdom like that. He played chess while they played checkers. A year later, someone messaged the Reddit account asking if he ever regretted it. He replied once and with just one line. Regret? No, I just wish I'd learned earlier that silence is the loudest revenge of all. And that, my friends, is why his story still echoes through Reddit years later. Not because it's filled with drama or shouting, but because it shows what real strength looks like. It's not in the anger. It's in the patience. It's in the calm before the storm. And the quiet after it. So to every man or woman who's ever been betrayed, remember Edward's story. You don't need to destroy anyone to win. You just need to step out of their chaos. Let karma do its job and make sure they never find peace knowing what they lost. They broke his heart. he broke their illusion. And in the end, he walked away richer, not in money but in peace. When asked what he'd say to others going through betrayal, Edward's words were simple. Don't burn your house down trying to keep a liar warm. Let them freeze in the cold truth they created. And that is why his revenge became legendary. They cheated. He waited. And when the time came, he didn't shout. He simply smiled and vanished from their world forever. What do you think? Did Edward go too far, or was his revenge perfectly fair? Let me know in the comments below, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is no revenge at all. Just peace and silence, because silence always wins.